They'll stand in front of the 15,000 employees virtually and say one thing. Behind closed doors, they'll say something slightly different, right? Jack might be the only public CEO that says the same thing at all times, but man, that's not my experience.
This podcast contains the arguably witty banter of two friends, Skippy and Dougals, that like to debate about investing. The content is intended to be entertaining and for informational purposes only, not investment advice. You should do your own research and consult a financial professional before using any of the information in this podcast, and especially before investing.
Welcome, everybody, to Skippy and Dougals. Thank you for listening. SkippyDougals@gmail.com. That is where you can send your listener mail, and go to SkippyDougals.com to learn all about us, and even more than you probably wanted to know. We got three things on the agenda today. There was an interview conversation with Jack Dorsey that we want to break down. So it got a little bit behind the scenes, not a lot, but enough to be interesting, behind the scenes of his 40% cut and what he's thinking about AI and the impact on organizations. We're going to walk through that. Then touch on a piece that says the future of everything is lies. Also about AI, not surprisingly. And then last, the investment excitement ratio. Those are the three items we're going to touch on.
Wasn't the past of everything lies?
That is a part of it. So we'll get to that. We'll get to that. It wasn't going to be a part of it, but now it's going to be a part of it. So we'll get to that piece. But that was the most cynical view. What about the present? Is the present lies?
Mostly lies. Mostly lies.
Also lies. Before we get to all this, I want to follow up on something that I said last week, or it was either last week or the week before. It doesn't matter. I was saying that I get all of these newsletters on investing, and I look at them, and I'm like, most of it's not even about investing. I want to give you, I'm going to read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 8 different pieces of news that are brought up in this investment newsletter. Okay, I want to be very clear. This investing newsletter. Now, we talk about how everything is applicable to investing, but I just want to walk through this. There are a couple things that actually are investing in here, but I want to walk through all 8. Former Virginia Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax shot and killed his wife and then killed himself. This is the number one
family
thing.
show, Dougals. This is a family show.
I get it, but I have to say this. This is the number one item in my investment newsletter. So, first of all, what has happened? Second, this has something to do with investing. Reed Hastings, the co-founder and former CEO of Netflix, is stepping down from the board. Okay, got that. Gatorade is rebranding to broaden its appeal beyond athletes. Okay, kind of. Charles Schwab launched a crypto investing product to compete with Robinhood and Coinbase. Okay, we're investing adjacent. New research showed that taking Tylenol during pregnancy has no effect on children developing autism.
I'm shocked.
Okay, yeah.
I'm glad I made 30% on Kenvy this year.
There you go. Congratulations. Condé Nast is shuttering its women's health magazine, Self, after 47 years.
Ooh, I did not know this. Breaking news.
Top Gun 3 is in the works, with Tom Cruise set to return as Pete Maverick Mitchell.
Yeah, this is actually the most interesting thing. Where does the plot go from here, Dougals? There's no place to go. They need, I know it's billions of dollars that they cannot turn down. They need to stop, all right?
They're not going to. You know how you know? Because of my investment newsletter. And then the last item is QVC is preparing to file for bankruptcy, which really put a dent in Lori Grainer's pitch to entrepreneurs on Shark Tank.
That was her whole thing. She's like, I can get you on QVC. Oh, wait, it doesn't exist.
She has exactly 3 more weeks to be able to say that. And then it's over. Anyway, this is my point. And I would think that if most of this was the news that you were going to bring into your investing newsletter, that you just wouldn't put it. Why 8 bullets? You didn't need 8 bullets to tell me about Gatorade rebranding. It just doesn't at all impact what I'm thinking of from an investing standpoint.
Oh, you're missing it. That's someone's job, and they're worried that AI is taking their job, and they're doing B- work to try and stay employed. That's all that's happening here. Steal your attention from your inbox. You have fallen for the trap.
You heard it here first. Okay. Let's hop into Jack Dorsey. So full disclosure, I did not read, there's a paper or an article of some sort that Jack Dorsey put out. I did not read that, where he talks about the future of hierarchy or lack of hierarchy in organizations. So didn't read that. But I did watch this video where he talks about it. So there might be some things from the article that I missed.
Full disclosure, I like Jack Dorsey, including his weird ways. So
He is-
I owned Twitter as a stock when he was the CEO, when it didn't make money, which is like nearly impossible for me. So I probably can't be. I'm biased. I think his beard is hilarious. It's all good. It's all good.
He is a super smart, super weird
100% smart.
dude.
Yes.
Like, it's just super. And I don't say weird there to be negative. It's just actually what's most amazing to me about his weirdness is that he could have been like what he was. So he was the first CEO of 2 publicly traded companies. First CEO, I think maybe the only CEO of 2 companies in the S&P 500 simultaneously.
Yeah. Well, okay. And I'm going to just correct you on weird. Sure. I think that's a reasonable word. What he is really smart and different, which is so interesting because he could be like everyone else. He's not. He's decided to take a different path. I don't know if that path is the right choice or the wrong choice, but I admire that it's unique. It's wonderful.
And this, I'm fine with your correction of the word weird. I'm still going to use it. What gets to me is this is what you're saying, what I hear from you, is to be weird and to be able to do those things is pretty amazing because a lot of the time, well, partly you probably have to be weird to try to do those things, but also a lot of the time there's conformity that happens that gets you into these positions. And he doesn't seem to care, but it's in a different way than like Elon doesn't care. Elon also doesn't care, but it's in a very different way. Like he's not just throwing middle fingers up to everybody and all that kind of stuff like Elon does. It's just like, I'm just going to think the way that I think. And there's a human component that, at least from what he puts out externally, that I see that comes from him. He's like, logic wins, but humanity is still important. Like that's the way that I view Jack Dorsey. Anyway, okay. So I'm going to touch on some of what he discusses here. So the core like center of this whole conversation, what he is like, as I've been working through and with these AI models for the last few years, and especially over the last 12 to 15 months, they have gotten to a point where Jack Dorsey, is stuck in this place where he's like, I see that the future can't be what it is right now. And I don't know how to balance the hope that I have for what we can do with it and the despair that it pushes on me. Like that's where he's kind of stuck. And then he's trying to interpret based on what he's learning, what does that mean for his business? So on hierarchy specifically, what he said is that when he looks at the history of hierarchies in business, the purpose that he sees from them is that they existed to manage information flow. That is why hierarchies were brought about. It's not because it's the optimal structure, but it's because that's how information can flow. And as he looks at what he sees that AI will enable for a new business model, is he says the company can be this intelligence system. So you can feed in all of our strategy decks, our financials, the meetings that we record, like everything in his company, because they're distributed, he's saying, everything in our company creates an artifact. And so we can take these artifacts and feed it into whatever system, right, they are using, whatever systems they're using. So therefore, our company is an intelligence system. And if you have that intelligence system, you don't need the hierarchy to then make information flow. And the examples he brought up, there's this danger. Do you want to say something?
Well, only if people speak truthfully and transparently, which doesn't always happen.
This was something that was going through my mind the whole time, it does seem like, at least in the way he talks, that he has a very optimistic and generous view on humans.
I think he does. I think that's another thing where he's a little different.
And so what you said, right, is something that was flowing through my head the whole time. So some of the examples that he gives of having this intelligence system that people can tap into, the most obvious one, given he's talking about hierarchies, is employees. Because if you have a question, you just ping the machine, right? You can answer your questions about our company. You can get as much information as the CEO, has. That's the first group. Second group he talks about is the board. He said every quarter, we show up at these board meetings and I bring these decks and financials and everyone has to read them. And then we have conversations about the data and that's our conversation. He said, what if instead, whenever you have a question, board, about our company, you just ask. And so you can get information about our company at all times. And therefore, every quarter when we get together, our conversations are more about the existential risks and opportunities like the big stuff. We're talking about the meaty things and not clarifying this or just informing you about that. The other group, this is fascinating. He's like, we're going to blow like disclosure for analysts fully out of the water. Like, whatever you want to know about us, just ask. Like, that's it. This is absolute disclosure.
The most Jack Dorsey take ever. Like, one, he believes, I've never worked for Jack Dorsey, but in every case I've been, the CEO will tell the quarterly employee town hall, right? They'll stand in front of the 15,000 employees virtually and say one thing. And then behind closed doors, they'll say something slightly different, right? And Jack he might actually do this. He might be the only public CEO that says the same thing at all times and doesn't care if people know the like 100% candid truth. But man, that's not my experience.
I've never experienced it. It's not that that's not my experience. I've never experienced anything close.
Well, exactly. And then like telling the analysts the same thing they're telling the employees, which is the same thing they're telling the senior vice president. I've never seen it. Never at all.
And there's certainly a view of that you could say is malicious, where like I want to manipulate the way that everyone's thinking to my will, etc. That's a way. More often, I'm going to also be generous with humans. More often what I see is it's like, if Tammy hears this word, I know it triggers her in a very specific way. And if Jimmy doesn't get this level of context before he gets the detail, then he jumps to this, right? There's like, it's understanding the individual humans and how they need to hear things in order to actually get the same message. And this blows that out of the water.
Well, so it's tailoring your message to your audience, which is a human skill that is important. You got to be careful picking these names, though. I got some text messages a few weeks back of you just randomly throwing people's names under the bus, and they come away insulted, Dougals. So be careful.
This is not random. No, Tammy, if you were listening. Okay, so then he's saying, so you take away the hierarchy, you get this flat org. He defines this as 3 core roles that they are building inside the company. What's interesting is when I think of role, I think of something much more specific than he gives, but he kind of means like persona, like work persona, kind of. I'll just tell you what they are and you'll get what I mean. So the first he says are builders. These are individual contributors. Their job is to build, just to do. And he says this could be a salesperson that's trying to sell, or it could be a customer service rep like that. But your job is to do the core work. Mm-hmm. Then the next group, he calls them DRIs, which I do not know what that stands for. But then he talks about durable humans. So I thought maybe the D is durable. Anyway, okay. What they are they're owners of the things that are happening. So they are kind of directing the work. And the last are player coaches. He said this is a version of what we've called managers in the past, except that he believes that the managers are going to manage by showing people how good work gets done. So you are doing the work as well. So those are the 3 groups. Again, I don't think of those as roles. That term just didn't apply to me, but that's what he used.
I believe a DRI is a directly responsible individual, popularized by Steve Jobs. And it's like a manager role, but for a project or problem. So they own the problem. I think he stole that from Jobs.
And so that would then apply to something else that he says, where he mentioned that he doesn't see that someone is necessarily, whether you're in the player coach or the DRI role, you're assigned to things. It's not as if this is your group, this is your team, and you have them. Okay, so that seems to apply. So then they asked, so what's the CEO's role? Like in this world, what's your job? And he said that the CEO is the architect of the system. You're responsible for the whole thing working. And so things that fall under that are things like culture. And he said like raising the bar, making sure expectations are at the right level, but just ensuring that the whole system ends up working. Something else he talked about was, this is a group I didn't bring up before when I talked about the intelligence system, where he said customers. Customers can also, now maybe they can't ping and ask any information about your company, but the thing that he talked most about was, he said in the end, if we're trying to create something for customers are your real signals. So decision making is to get much closer to where the customer is, and a customer should be able to ask for a feature, and you just go, okay. And like the feature is there, and you can test it. Like there's so little friction between a customer saying, I want X and X being available to them. Also, that's ultimate personalization, I think, probably in the end. Maybe not at full scale, but at least in little mini microdoses. So then you get rid of all the internal politics that come along with that. You don't have to convince people to try it. You just go, the customer wants it. Boom. It now exists. Let's see how it works. Someone then, I can't remember who it was. So this conversation was the person that runs the podcast, who's now a partner at Sequoia, who's a co-founder of HubSpot, but I can't remember his name. Then Roelof Botha, who's on Square's board, or Block's board, was also on there. So I can't remember which of them brought this up, but the question was, so does AI now, is that your core decision maker? When you say it's your intelligence, like, is AI making most of the decisions? And he was like, whoa, no. And this is something cool that I thought was interesting that he said. He said that most times people view AI as producing output. He said, AI is actually just an additional input. The humans are still the judgment layer and the decision makers. You just get much more input. And so it's not that they are making decisions. They are just another input into what's happening and their ability to, as he was talking about the customer's ability to prototype.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree. I don't know who's characterizing AI as a advanced decision-making leap forward. It's a data collection and analyst leap forward.
A lot of people.
So, how? That doesn't make sense to me.
Okay, I'm gonna be cynical here for a moment, but I know you recognize this. If you take the people that would come to work and try and avoid decisions all day themselves, for the most part, those people now have another entity that can feign decision-making for them.
Yeah, it makes B+ non-controversial decisions.
Yeah, that is.
It's like the easy button to company ruin. Oh, what's the path of least resistance that will ruffle the least feathers? That's not what Jack Dorsey did when he laid off 40% of the company. Fine, sure. If people want to outsource decision-making power, by all means. These are not board-level people.
Yes, no. Well, shouldn't be. But I would push back on that one too. So, an aside, but have you read The Art of Gathering? Priya Parker's book. If you are someone out there who organizes a bunch of meetings, whether that's inside of a company or you do events, that kind of stuff, I think it's a book that's worth reading, at least learning the concepts of it. But the reason you just brought this up, or it triggered for me, was because one of the components or attributes that she says of a good meeting is that when you said controversial, she said it should offend somebody. When you think about not the content, but the reason for it. If you create a reason and you come up with the purpose of that meeting, and there's no one that would disagree or no one that can't see themselves in it, then
what's the point?
Yeah, what's the point?
Well, this goes back to Dorsey's AI is the collector of all information in the company, and us talking about tailoring that information. There are conversations with decision makers that have firing power in every company, every large company, every day about so-and-so. I'll use Douglas as an example. Currently being underperforming and maybe going on a PIP, or maybe doing this, or maybe needing mentoring, or maybe getting fired, right? Let's assume in Dorsey's world, this is extreme, it's probably stupid, but that Zoom records all my calls, and that rolls up the thing, and there's radical transparency, and I can walk in on Monday morning and say, who is being discussed as a potential firing candidate? And it's going to spit back some names. Those conversations happen. They happen all the time. There's certain things you can't share. I love that he's a different thinker. It doesn't work yet.
Yeah. And I do think that depending on what extreme he goes to, it will test a new boundary and we'll learn a lot from it. So likely, for the reasons you're stating, that if you keep following the thread that you have, it will not work in its fullest. But there are likely certain areas where information is protected, or whether intentionally or not, information is not available. I'll say that, whether or not it's protected.
Yeah.
And people will get it and you go, oh, actually, that, if more people have access to that, it makes our impact greater. It's better. And so he will test boundaries and find out some things.
I guess, but there's also things where I could see the AI getting confused. There's Dougal's coworker who's just frustrated is like, we need to fire Dougal's, just like off the cuff, but it gets recorded by AI. And then there's Dougal's boss who goes, we need to fire Dougal's. And those two comments from two different people mean drastically different things.
Speaking of which, let's transition. Speaking of firing Dougal's, I'm going to reach into the fishbowl and go to this next piece. This piece is called The Future of Everything is Lies, I guess. Where do we go from here? So this is a 32-page PDF when you click right into it. And the PDF is filled with, I didn't count the number, but it's something like 30 different, or maybe more than, different little mini essays that this person wrote. I love it.
I don't know where you find this stuff. I really don't.
I just love it. It's just a little ranty poo galore from a lot of different angles. I'll get to the heart of the matter here and then hit on a couple items specifically. If you zoom out from this whole thing, he's basically saying that what AI allows us to do is to look at scale at a lot of falsehoods. The reason for that, and the reason I transitioned when I did, because the reason for that is that AI generates a lot of plausible narratives based on patterns. We've talked about different versions of that many, many times. But the more that you start to rely upon AI, the more complexity it creates within these systems. And it's really hard to find the little pieces of error that exist in these complex systems. And humans are going to be more abstracted as to how the systems were even created. And so you end up with this web of what he's calling lies, effectively. I'll pause there before I go on.
Let me make sure I follow. So LLMs are basically trained to take some data and make a compelling narrative that holds weight with humans.
Exactly.
LLMs want to please their human counterpart. You see this all the time when you say, I'm looking for data on X. It almost always 75+% of the time says, oh yeah, here's the blah, 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 because its goal, its whole purpose in life, in a lot of ways, is to satisfy the human curiosity along the direction of thinking that the questioning is going. So it takes a few leaps of faith to get there. I see this happen all the time. But it creates a compelling narrative behind it with the analysis generally in a little bit of a black box. This is like what it's designed for. Of course it's great at this. I think there's so many opportunities created by this, though.
So the part that you didn't get to, which is the last thing that I said, everything that you just said, absolutely right. Thank you for repeating it in that way. When you start to do that at scale, when you have convincing mistakes that happen at scale in complex systems, what becomes the bottleneck, give all the productivity, all that stuff is a non-issue. What becomes the bottleneck is verification. And one of the things, again, this is many, many little mini essays. One of the things they're saying is verifying truth becomes super hard, especially because humans are getting further and further away from understanding how the things work. It's fast forwarding to the future a little bit, not necessarily
it's
right now.
Alpha, though. This is the opportunity. There's so much alpha because the talking point, the narrative is going to become X, which is the narrative might be led by the large language model, but then the people that actually know and are willing to work a little hard to actually dig into the data and do the deep analysis that the LLM is glossing over, you're going to make tons of money.
Yeah. So, yep. I'm not saying none of that's true. Both these things can be true.
All right, I'll be quiet. Go ahead.
Okay. One of the things this made me think about was I don't want to speak ill of my employer alma mater. However, when I read about these convincing mistakes at scale and something sounding right but not being quite right, plausible narratives, I could not help but to think about my time at McKinsey.
Dude, come on. That's the whole business.
But I'm not going that far. I'm not going quite that far. But
I'm not even throwing shade. It's just, it is. That's what people are buying.
I'm going to give you a real scenario. I'm going to skip all the identifying detail. But This is a brief real scenario. With a client, had this slide We're walking through a whole deck, but there was one particular slide that we pulled up. That was the slide that was, here are the next few phases. This is where you should go. It had the chevrons on top. Font was beautiful. The colors were perfect. All the words. There was a little diagram. There were a couple sparks. You know the slide I'm talking. Client looks up and says, I have no idea what this says, but it looks so right. Let's do it. And that, to me, is everything. Like, that is what it looks right. It looks polished. Your columns are all lined up perfectly under the chevrons. You've got the spark exactly where the spark needs to be for me to feel good about my business. This is what they're saying happens with AI, but at massive scale. When the answers aren't as easy to check, I think you're right. I think it does create opportunity. I'm not in the doom and gloom camp, but I find this to be interesting mostly because I like cynicism. You know what I mean? Like I like curmudgeons. I like reading things that poke bears. Like I kind of enjoy that.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that ignore whether or not this is the truth of the future. I think that it's valuable for us to sit back and think, yeah, like we all know these are plausible narratives. They're not truth. We know it makes mistakes. All that intellectually, I think the people that use AI understand. And I still think that as humans, it is very easy to know that and still go, okay, yeah, I'll take this output. It seems right enough. Like I still think that that's easy for humans to do. And when you do that, it compounds. You start this plausible narrative, compounds off the last plausible narrative, compounds off the last one. And now you have this web of nonsense that is hard to verify, but looks right enough. And you can get away with it. I present it and I get away with it. Be careful of that. That's all.
You know, at some point in, I don't know, 1903 or maybe 1850, there was someone actually like working on Wall Street, or the job really doesn't matter, right? And a new reporter from the New York Times, let's say, came in to start cover that. And the reporter created this daily narrative of what's actually happening in the place that they have real life experience. And I can guarantee they felt like, no, there were people, maybe half the people, that thought the narrative being created by this human who doesn't actually work here, who just stops by twice a week, is not a fair narrative. It's not truly representative of what's actually happening. I just say go make money. Find the errors and go fix it. But maybe I'm too simplistic.
No, I don't think you are. I think it's really smart what you're saying. And I think that's not where most people go. Just to be clear. This does touch on, to your point, what we discussed a few weeks ago. I think you might have disagreed when I said this. I can't remember quite, but I hope you did, because that's the fun of these conversations. If this is what the AI, what the technologies do, what do the humans do? And that is what you just said. I think like that's a version of it. If this is going to be true, I'm not saying it is, but if this is going to be true, where we have all this stuff that blows up and there's so much complexity, and now what do the humans do? Cool. And I think that thought process, I think, is always quite good. If this is true, now what do I do? Not if this is true, here's how I suffer. Like everything can be an opportunity and a setback. They can both be true. So, All right. You ready to transition?
Yeah. I want to pull one thing out of my fishbowl. It's really quick. Shockingly, it's about Nike. One, apparently they put a sign in Boston that says runners welcome, walkers tolerated, and people cried. So that's kind of funny to me because it's leading up to the Boston Marathon. People, they're not saying you're not allowed to walk. But anyway, the CEO, Elliott Hill, and Tim Cook has done this multiple times this year, bought more stock this week. He didn't say anything. He didn't have a sequelity. Sorry. He didn't publicize it. It just, he had to file for the 10K. I just need your thoughts. This is not about Nike. It's not about Elliott Hill. I don't understand why more CEOs don't do this. The business is on tough times. The stock price is in the gutter. What is right, in my opinion, is you shut up, you buy the stock, and you fix the business. Those are the 3 steps. That's it. Why don't more people do this? Like, this is pretty easy in terms of the right approach. What I see so many CEOs do is talk themselves to death, make empty promises, hire consultants, you name it. Anything but buy the stock, shut up, and fix the business. And it doesn't seem that hard. There's no guarantee he's right, but he's putting his cold, hard cash on the line. You can't show conviction more than that.
I agree with that point. I have a lot of speaking of cynical, I have other things I could say along those lines, but I agree with your general. Actually, you know what? Let's have fun.
Go for it.
I agree with your point. CEOs are human beings. And this is a different version of what I said before when I was talking about people avoiding decisions. I don't think that CEOs avoid decisions, but I do think that human beings naturally avoid controversy and general contention. And so that means that they make up stories. This is not just CEOs. I'm talking about humans, but CEOs are humans. You make up stories that fit in your comfortable model of how you believe that like life should work. And the comfortable model here is actually not just doing a thing and letting stuff play out and pushing and improving your business. That's not what if you say, like, what is a CEO there for? The comfortable model is that you should be promoting, you should be pushing. The comfortable model is very different. Are you agreeing or disagreeing? I'm looking at your face trying to figure out where you're.
I hear this. I've heard analysts and other people claim that the number one job of the CEO is to basically pitch the investment opportunity of the company to analysts. And I just think that's insane. I think the number one job of the CEO is to create culture that makes a good business that is highly profitable and predictable. And then I think people show up at your door eager to write you a check. And that's just a belief I have that's not changing.
Yeah, I know. And maybe I was going even more too specific. Just saying, like, but that human beings, they have to operate in a world that makes themselves feel comfortable generally. And that has a bunch of different, that can manifest in a whole bunch of different ways. And so like a first principle thing, like what you said, just isn't what people see as the job. Like I think people more often will say, what is the job supposed to be? And how do I become what the job is supposed to be?
Yeah. Yep.
But I agree with your point that in the end, it's like, you're supposed to generate future cash flows. Like that is what you're supposed to do. That's it.
I can guarantee he is working 100-hour weeks with leading teams to, like, I would argue he's telling the story. He's just doing it internally. I don't think you need the megaphone and to be on Wall Street telling the story. I think you need to be in the corporate headquarters or at the major clients telling the story. You're rebuilding the business from the ground up. So that's it. Yeah. Buy the stock, shut up, fix the business.
One thing that's fascinating with me with Nike in particular.
Mm-hmm.
So I bought Nike for the first time. It was after you. You've been talking about it for 75 years, Nike.
Yep.
I bought Nike about a year ago, roughly, a little over a year ago, after Liberation Day. And over this past year, what has happened for me, so Nike like went up a bunch, it's fallen a bunch. And from the get, my perspective was that Nike was it's going to take time, years for this turnaround. But if there's a pop over the next year and I can get long-term capital gains for like a 40-50% pop, like I'll take that. I was like, that's kind of where I was. That's not what happened after a year. But instead what's happened is I go, okay, so now we're another year into the turnaround and it's even cheaper. So now I have less time. Like if you play out the thesis, I have less time to wait for a cheaper stock.
Yeah.
It's pretty fascinating to watch. But anyway, that's an aside. That's not what we're supposed to be talking about.
No, it's interesting. I mean, 10-year lows. Take it for what it's worth. It
might have been 12. I think it might have been 12.
At least. Sorry, I'm only looking at a 10-year chart in front of me. At least, it's cheap at the moment, but it's not. It's cheap from a price to sales perspective, but the earnings have dried up because of some strategic thing happening behind the scenes we won't talk about. But like they have definitely sacrificed net income and free cash flow for this turnaround, and they better be right, or they just better be right.
You just better be right.
Yeah. Or you won't be the CEO any longer, regardless of how much stock you buy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Going back to the Jack Dorsey thing, when he said the only job of a board member is to decide on who the CEO should be, flat out.
Very Jack Dorsey.
Jack Dorsey. Okay. All right. So the last item in the fishbowl, investment excitement ratio. Whew, those are just good words. This is in behind the balance sheet on Substack. And this was like, there's so much confirmation bias when I was looking through this that it was just great. Just so great. So I'm going to talk through some of the things here. Where the investment excitement ratio piece comes from, like what that's from is what we've talked about, and we will talk about many years. We talked about in the past, we'll talk about years in the future, is if you look at the difference between fundamentals and looking at the fundamentals of an organization and looking at the story of an organization, the investment excitement, that is what they're talking about, is that story. And so what they're saying is that capital follows narrative before it follows fundamentals in general, in waves. And
Morgan Housel says the best story always wins.
And when there's new technologies, that's especially true. But also what happens when you have new technologies, and they go back to the same things that we've talked about here before. They go back to the railroads and the .com and, all the stuff in your book, Pop. They do all that. He says what happens with these new technologies is that you have all the CapEx and all the spending that comes in that always, in their words, that always trumps demand. Like, it comes way before the demand that's ready for it. We don't know what the demand's going to be. So you have all this money that ends up coming in. That money comes in a concentrated way because it comes in wherever the story is. Like, all the money goes into wherever the story is. So then valuations come up. And when you have valuation, concentration, and CapEx that are all rising together, risk compounds. And that is a problem. And so the pattern they laid out was, you say there's a real breakthrough. And I like that they brought this up because it's, as we've discussed, they say a real breakthrough. It's not that the thing's made up. It's not the internet was made up or that AI is. There's an actual breakthrough. Capital floods in, it overbuilds, and then investors, equity holders, are holding the bag every time because of the demand situation. I'll pause there. That's the core of it.
Do you want to go to real Fantasyland?
Like in Oakland?
Way out 3 planets away Fantasyland?
Oh, okay, no. I think you're talking about like Disney World or something.
You're going there anyway. There's a breakdown here of CapEx as a percent of EBITDA that says Amazon and Meta and Oracle are like AT&T in 1998, which is interesting. But have you seen any of the data? This is not in this piece, but somehow it sparked my memory on the percent of data centers that are built in the U.S. versus anywhere else in the world. Like, the U.S. is the powerhouse when it comes to data centers.
I have not seen that.
That's this really weird thing. We want data centers to power AI, to power cloud computing, to power all these other things. World leader there. Now, this is where we're going 3 planets away. Have you seen that for the first time in history, according to Zelensky, Ukraine took territory using only robot fighting systems? Have you seen this?
No.
Okay. So they have like these new line of 7 different types of robot tanks and fighting machines and drones that are taking territory, effectively winning the war for them, right? This gets to the place of sci-fi land pretty quick, right? So if robots fight the wars, robots win the wars, what ultimately matters is who can produce the most robots. Without question, right now, that's China. Like, China is just better at manufacturing high-tech stuff than anywhere else in the world and has significantly more capacity. What's interesting about this data center play is if you manufacture the robots with, say, a LLM that lives on the robot, then those robots control themselves, right? But if you manufacture robots with an LLM that goes back to a data center where you can update the model, right? Anthropic can come out with the next version so they can see how the robots actually fight each other and then modify the LLM to change the strategy to fight the new robots in a different way.
Yeah.
Are you still with me? Is this too many planets away?
Both are true.
Then the data center capacity might actually matter. It might be who can send their robots new fighting techniques through the cloud based on LLMs that are being refined in real time to win wars. That's it.
So I'm gonna live with you in Fantasy Island.
Yeah.
For a second. The plane. I'm gonna live with you there. That also assumes that the size of the data center, or the construction of the data center that you have today, is what matters. It's the right one for the future.
Very true. We could talk about World War II and who built their tanks more recently and how the German tanks were better and faster. It's very interesting. And ultimately, for data centers to matter at all, you have to be able to manufacture enough robots that your robots just aren't overwhelmed by the other robots. I swear we can move on from this. But for some reason, that piece, right? Saying that Alphabet or Meta spending a bunch of money on data centers ultimately like matters I have a hard time getting there. I'm like, this just seems like a bunch of wasted money, guys. You used to be a capital light business that was an investor's dream, and now you're AT&T. AT&T, where the stock price doesn't move and you pay a 5% dividend for 30 years. Like, so I guess I'm trying to rationalize, and unfortunately I did it with war there. Like, what are the benefits of all these data centers besides just making your Instagram reels slightly more addicting and wasting a bunch of energy?
I'm still in the camp that the benefit of having the data centers is only that you can't not have the data center.
Yeah.
It's like, who was it? I think it was Prince at Citibank, not the singer, but the CEO of Citibank at the time. Although today, people are bringing in celebrities to be on their executive staff for weird things. So, like, if it was today, Prince might be like a VP at Citibank. Anyway, so at Citibank, who when the lead up to the great financial crisis was happening, and I don't remember the quote, I wish I could remember exactly, but he basically said something along the lines of, yeah, the party is going to end, but I need to be at the party or else my board will be angry. Yep. It was like, those are not the words, but it was effectively, that's what he was saying. I think that that's the benefit today, which to me is a whole heap of nonsense, right? It's like we were discussing with Apple. If you can kind of sit back and watch everyone else increase their CapEx, cool. Like, that's great. Mm-hmm. But to me, that's it. I'm not sure about this robot future that you're...
Sorry, I took us way off topic.
Yeah. No, it's all good. I said the core idea. I mean, the only other thing to say is when everyone's piling their money into the same stuff, then that's the stuff that becomes quote unquote obvious. And generally speaking, if you are contradictory and right, that is where returns are coming from. And so if you take that out at scale, if you are obvious in the long term, that is not where the returns end up coming from. Jumping into the obvious thing. What no one knows is, what is the long term? Is the long term right now 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, a decade, tomorrow? That's what nobody knows. It's what makes this game hard in the short term.
Did this piece convince you? Did it change your thoughts about bubbles or a potential bubble today? Did it shape your thinking?
No, I still think we are in a bubble today, and that the question just ends up being what makes it pop. But it didn't change any view that I had on that. That's why I said it was mostly confirmation bias for me. It's like, yeah, all these things, like all this stuff starts to make sense. I'm gaining in this, what I'll call bubble, a more appreciation for, because I wasn't deep into 25 years ago, is the CapEx piece of seeing the people spend the money. Like that's the part that I'm gaining more appreciation for, of just being like, wow, that's a lot of money. Like, it's just so much money.
And sorry, that's where I'm trying to go with my data center example. In like when we're building railroads, it's pretty obvious, even at the time, like, oh, we're going to be able to transport a bunch of stuff around the country. Even if all the investors that spent that CapEx go bust, there's still like hardcore infrastructure that's there. When you're laying fiber optic cable across the Atlantic Ocean, it's probably like, oh, even if those investors go bust, we are going to be able to more quickly correspond with folks in London. Those are obvious insights. They weren't good investments, but they're obvious insights. To me, I think in the back of my head, I'm going, what do we do with all this excess data center capacity that's headed our way?
I disagree with that then. Maybe I'll take back my making fun of you.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I do think that data is going to become more and more important for a variety of reasons in the future. And so having large data centers, it's hard for me to believe that won't end up being fortuitous in the future.
Well, and sorry, it's not only data centers, it's GPU capacity, right? CPU capacity. It's like processing capacity.
I'm going to zoom out and just call it capacity for this wave of technology, whatever the capacity is. It's going to make sense. Not in the exact way of how we're deploying it today, all that. Just like I doubt that it was really that obvious across the board when we were building out the railroads that the rail, the specific rail we were putting out, was the right rail. That Chicago to New Orleans would be the right route. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not that you know
Come on
specifically.
now. it's the most efficient way to transport 1,000 pounds of junk.
Yeah, but you don't know what you don't know. I'm being that specific because you don't know if New Orleans is going to be a big city in the future. So, like, is the rail that you're laying out the right rail? No, but is rail right? Yes.
Wait.
I'm saying
how often?
thing.
How often did the 10th largest city 100 years ago not become roughly the 10th largest city 100 years later? Like,
It
there's
happens.
a few examples.
St. Louis.
St. Louis is a good one, actually. Still,
I'm saying it happens.
you think if we were laying the railroads today, they'd be like, you know what? Leave St. Louis off it. You have to go through St. Louis to get to Denver.
Anyway, I don't want to go. I don't want to pour St. Louis. I don't want to.
I kind of do. Let's go there. No, I'm joking.
Let's not go there. My point is that broadly, I would say the capacity that we're building out for these technologies, sure, exactly how we're doing it, probably not. But to me, it's more time frame than a what. I don't know if this type of data in 40 years is going to be valuable or in a decade is going to be valuable, but I feel pretty strongly that in the near to medium term, it's way too much capacity. That I feel pretty big about. But data is just becoming ever more important, and you're going to, even as we become more efficient, we can use the space differently.
We'll find out. I'm not convinced that that's actually true.
You're saying only in the scenario in which we have warring robots that each have their own LLMs is the only case in which data centers?
No, listen, if there's cheap capacity, it will get used. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it might get used in a way that someone says, like, is the sky blue today? And we collect 2 billion samples of color readings and put them into this fancy LLM and spit it out, and it costs $100,000 to do, when the human eye could just look up at the sky and realize the sky looks blue today, and we can move on. I think we will create complexity to fill the capacity that maybe we did not need.
We can end on that. I think that is just a human level statement.
Yeah.
I'll agree with that generally.
The listener mail, skippydougals@gmail.com. All thanks for the show. skippydougals.com. Premium membership to support the show. skippydougals.supercast.com. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.